Good afternoon and welcome to NCIA's Industry Essentials Educational Webinars, our premier digital educational platform featuring a variety of interactive programs to provide you timely, engaging, and essential education when and where your team needs it most. My name is Bryan Gilbert, the Deputy Director of Events here at NCIA, and as always, I'm very excited to welcome you all to another edition of our Committee Insights series today, being presented by NCIA's Human Resource Committee. Before we get started, a thank you and final note to our guests who are joining us for the limited preview on our Facebook live stream as well. If you're an active NCIA member, follow the short link in our description to log into your account and join the conversation. If you're not an NCIA member, follow the Join Now link to activate your membership or register now to purchase a discounted pass so you don't miss out on this invaluable programming today. Now, let's get this show on the road. In today's program, we'll hear from cannabis industry recruitment leaders, Bryan Passman of Hunter and Esquire, and Kimley Svendsen of Drive Talent, who will be sharing insights on the positive culture shifts and creative hiring practices, which have been born from this resilient industry's response to the global pandemic. Well, I know our audience is eager to dive into today's program and our panel is ready to start the conversation, so let's not waste any more time. To kick things off, I'd like to welcome our co-panelists for today's session to the virtual stage. They've activated their video feeds and they're ready to join the program now. Before we get started, I think we're going to turn it over to Bryan and Kimley to give us a little bit of background on their own expertise before diving into today's conversation.
All right, thank you, Bryan and Brooke. You guys have been amazing in helping us to get this set up. I was kind of hoping we would keep the music going like throughout the session.
we can pepper it back in.
Yeah. I lead Drive Talent. We're a woman-owned boutique recruiting firm based in Chicago, and we've majored in cannabis for about 5 years now and focus on executive search and with both plant touching and ancillary businesses, and more recently have kind of developed a niche in consulting with leadership on diverse hires. And this is my second year on the NCIA HR committee.
And Bryan Passman here from Hunter and Esquire. Definitely thanks, Bryan and Brooke. It's been great working this out with you. Thanks for being here with me, Kimley. I am a headhunter at heart. It's all I've ever done for my 20+ year professional career. We've been at this about 3.25 years, specialized in the cannabis industry, retained executive search across all geographies, also a boutique search firm. I'm going to steal a little bit from you, Kimley. We're also woman owned. The Esquire and Hunter and Esquire is my wife, Jessica. I want to give her a shout out. She deserves a ton of credit for helping us get here. And yeah, happy to get this started. Thanks everyone for attending.
All right, fantastic. Well, huge thanks to both of you all for taking the time to contribute to our educational programming in advance of today's program. All right, well, as I noted at the beginning of the program, we have a number of live polls that are going to correspond to each segment of today's program. So the first one that you all responded to, and I think that we're sharing the results right now. So we're going to leave that up so Bryan and Kimley can take that into consideration while we dive into today's conversation starters. So our first question for the panel today, unless they wanted to address any of the insights from the live survey first, I have queued up here, what roles were mostly impacted during the COVID pandemic, and why do you believe that they were, Bryan and Kimley?
Yeah, well, first off, a couple of people said neither the crunch nor the pandemic affected their business. That is outstanding. Glad to see that. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, I'll answer the question first. I think we're talking about what roles were impacted. Yes. And why. So, for us, we saw a lot of senior leader roles impacted really across functions. My take on that is, it was a tough time if we back up to a year ago, certainly still tough for some, but a year ago, looking at the capital crunch, dovetailing into the pandemic, I think it was wartime CEO playbook time. And There was a lot of inspiration to hold on to some cash. And I think a lot of companies looked at, well, who's the next highest paid person or persons here after our founder leaders. And so we did see a lot of very essential roles cut, heads of legal, heads of finance. There really were, I think, a few roles that were safe from it. Probably the roles that were hit most hardest, departments that were hit hardest were marketing. We really saw a lot of marketing talent hit hard. I think they were deemed somewhat non-essential. Certainly no offense to marketing folks. I learned a hard lesson through the pandemic, creating content that was really important, but I think it was more of a focus on essential operations and direct revenue generating roles. So we did see the marketing departments hit particularly hard. And then last but not least, I'll give a shout out to the more junior and mid-level folks that were hit hard, just because, companies scaled a lot leading up to this. And I do think that there was a lot of hiring for what we might be, for the what if rather than the what is. So I think there was a lot of right sizing as it relates to some groups being scaled up a little bit too aggressively leading up to everything that hit the industry.
Yeah, I agreed. And particularly the executive side, I saw more hanging on to CFOs, just because, the need to navigate through this from a financial perspective. And although I did see some, CFOs eliminated and controllers kept, because there was the idea that, controllers can do kind of the tactical stuff that we're needing right now. And agreed on the marketing front. I think what we noticed is the hard thing was that companies struggling with that kind of how do we continue branding efforts when, and we don't want to be tone deaf to what's going on right now and really pushing our brand. And so, yeah, I did see an impact on marketing. And there were other ways, and maybe this might be a later question, Bryan, but other ways that I saw companies being creative in terms of well, not necessarily, maybe there's layoffs, but then also a reduction in pay or furloughing people as well.
Yeah, exactly. I know that was something that most of our members experienced, similar on the marketing side. I know even at our association itself, we had to really make those hard decisions mid last year of, where do we prioritize, our staffing and things like that. So I definitely can share the pain there and can understand having to take on the burden of content creation when that wasn't something that you were previously primarily responsible for. So yeah, our next question dives into a little bit of what you all touched on as to, the reasons, what drove these reductions and the overall assessment of what was merited. I think that you all both touched on, revenue generating positions, taking priority, but were there any other, primary reasons that drove these reductions that you all wanted to touch on?
I guess what I noticed was it was almost like these stages, like the stages of grief, like the shock and then the denial and then, anger, acceptance, all of that. But initially what I attributed the kind of the big reaction was the fear of the unknown. Like, we don't know what's going to happen. And, what will this look like in a couple months? Or are we really going to be out of this in a year? So the initial kind of cause of it I saw was kind of this fear of not knowing what's coming. And so let's kind of try and get ahead of it as much as we can.
Yeah. Indeed.
Exactly. We felt that the association so much throughout the year of having to push back and postpone our trade show multiple times throughout the summer and the fall. And, we're still sort of up in limbo as it stands for this year as well. So definitely can feel that pain. Did you have anything else to add on that, Bryan?
I love what you just said, Kimley. I would completely, wholeheartedly agree. And yeah, we saw a lot of the cutbacks happen early in that first initial stage, which I describe as the freak out. And look, a lot of businesses in our industry have done really well, but the reality is it's a tough industry, and a lot of these businesses are strapped for cash. It's expensive to operate in the space, and so cash is king. And looking at costs. I think tough decisions were made early on with the comfort of, look, this is not a very difficult industry to attract people to. So if we make the hard decision now and cut that person, if we can't call them back up later, we'll post the job and, get 200 or 300 applicants overnight. So I think that, inspired some of those early cuts as well, because it's a plus, of course, for our industry. It's not tough to attract interested talent.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that leads right into this final question on this segment. So when did hiring in the cannabis industry pick up again that you all saw over the last few months, if it really has at all?
Yeah. We look at February, March, April, May, June last year was pretty quiet. Our searches largely focused on direct revenue generating roles, just heavy sales and business development search. For us, things came back pretty nicely. I'll always remember it was my birthday week in late July. We got hit with a number of nice projects, and really it just kept picking up steam from there. So I'd say, thankfully for us, late July last year, hiring came back, and it's across the board. It's been all functions, and thankfully marketing hiring is back. Yay for all those great marketers at home.
All right, perfect. Well, we're coming up to the end of our first allotted sort of segment. So we do want to offer the opportunity for the audience members to join the conversation. If you have any specific burning questions that you want to pose to the panel as it relates to those last three discussion topics, let us know. Raise your hand in the audience pool while we're soliciting responses to the next live survey that's going to feed into our next conversation starter. All right, let's give this a few moments while we're waiting for responses to come in. Brooke, whenever you see us hit a sort of peak with the survey, feel free to close that up and share the results for the panel. And no hands up in the audience pool yet. All right, so let's transition into the next segment of the program. Why don't we get that live survey shared, Brooke? Right. Okay, perfect. All right, so we've got some responses in. Thank you all to the audience members that got those responses into the live survey. The question was, what has been the most impactful hiring practice shift for your company during the pandemic? See that Zoom interviews seems to take the cake there. And what has the biggest challenge been for your organization when it comes to hiring during the pandemic? Looks like no challenge. All right, we're thriving despite it all. Okay, perfect. So I think that's sticking in line with the impact that the pandemic had on that first poll. All right. Okay, perfect. So why don't we just keep the conversation going? So this question's primarily geared towards Bryan, but Kimley, if you have any insights on the topic as well, feel free to chime in. How do hiring practices differ within the cannabis industry versus other more well-established industries?
Certainly. Well, look, the cannabis industry is special. We like to talk about this plant is nothing overly mystical and magical, but we can argue that all day long for or against. But at the end of the day, it's a special industry, and I think that the cannabis industry hiring focuses a lot on industry fit, probably more so than other industries do, which is important. It's a nascent industry, and in my opinion, doesn't matter who the company is in the space. They might be big and publicly traded, but we're all startups in this space, and so as a whole, we're vetting for someone who's a fit to building and creating and pivoting and adapting and all the things that we vet people for all day. So I think it's different in that way. There's with the startup nature of it, a significant amount of friends and family hiring. You have a lot of, well, I want to hire those people that I really trust and vibe with because, we're in the trenches all day together. And again, companies in this space, I don't think any are big enough where anyone can really hide out like you can in other industries. So there's a lot of looking for the friends and family. Really to the point I made before, you've got a pretty easy time in collecting a lot of applicants. Certainly getting from your applicant pool to the right hire, is a challenge, but just getting that applicant pool built up isn't too difficult. So I think with that, you get a lot of very quick to hire, quick to fire in the cannabis industry. There's, not a big focus on, attention to, very careful, methodical, onboarding and thinking about, well, are we going to hire this person for years or maybe even decades to come? I think it's more about let's hope they can hang on for the first few months, maybe a year, and that's a win. So you have a lot of that, and really, last but not least, a lot of newly created position hiring. You've got just a lot of newly created positions that are born every day in this industry. So I think just a ton of hiring around a newly created role without a profile to point back to say this type of profile works, and we know that this person is going to work for this role. Just you don't have those insights to look back on.
Yeah, exactly. I can relate to the interesting job titles that I see every day come through our registration systems. It's one of my favorite things when we're going through our name tags. So perfect. All right, Kimley, did you have anything to add on the difference in hiring practices that you see being unique within the cannabis industry?
And I agree with everything that Bryan said. And maybe this isn't necessarily unique to cannabis, but it's kind of the stage of growth that the industry is in kind of overall. And that is that I'm noticing less what I call like I don't know if this is the democratization of the hiring process, where everyone gets to weigh in on whether or not a hire is made. And then you end up with like 20 people in the selection process. And but I've noticed that as the industry has matured overall, then companies too are, now they have a trusted team that they're entrusted to make the hiring decisions, and it doesn't have to be everyone kind of weighing in on that decision.
Well, I'll add something to that, which is kind of fun as more strategic human capital leaders enter the industry, and so we have those people on the other side of it. It's been fun for us. You've probably done this too, collaborating with them, acknowledging, okay, we have this community hiring culture. So Bryan and team, let's challenge ourselves to get it down to just a few so we can actually get a decision, right? Which is tough for me, because I always subscribe to the book of, well, if we've got umpteen great candidates for the role, let's give a hiring company all the options and increase the odds of getting a great hire. But you make a really good point. You do have to sort of pair that back with the hiring by committee, so you don't just get stuck interviewing forever.
Right.
Yeah, I think everyone here at NCIA has had a turn sitting on a hiring committee at one point over the last few years. Perfect, and I think that leads right into this next question. So we just sort of covered what makes the hiring process as it relates to the cannabis industry unique from other industries. But where do you all also see an opportunity for cannabis to continue being creative and do things differently, specifically as it relates to hiring diverse talent?
I can jump in on that one. I mean, this is one of the reasons I chose to get into cannabis recruiting, because I was really excited about the opportunity to kind of do it differently, maybe than I had seen in more well-established industries when it came to diverse hiring. And I mean, I will say there have been, some discouraging moments where I felt like, okay, we're just kind of falling back into, what I see elsewhere with these more like the backgrounds that are expected to check certain boxes on a job description and not really like kind of look outside of that and look for the less traditional candidates. So I think it really, what I have seen more so in cannabis is that openness to less traditional backgrounds, and to see the translatable skills that can apply to this space. And really, I think it is the key, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about this later, but the key is to focus on also diversity at the leadership level, whether it's, women, people of color, LGBTQ, like, I think that's, it seems like, cannabis, I'm seeing more of that, but I think there's so much more opportunity for them to kind of lead the charge and show the positive impact that that has on the bottom line as well. Not only the right thing to do, but it, it has a positive business impact also.
Yeah, very, very good stuff. And I would add that, in this industry, we have no shortage of social equity programs and focus on doing whatever we can to right the wrongs from the war on drugs. And so with that, this industry has a great opportunity because we all know that some of those groups were disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. So, with those social equity efforts, hopefully that translates more and more and more to people with more diverse backgrounds being brought into this industry, because we know other mainstream industries are less willing to bring on someone with a record. So I think it's definitely a responsibility for the cannabis industry to help a lot of those people get into some great careers, whereas they can't otherwise.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And for anyone that might have missed our Catalyst Conversations program yesterday, our webinar series that specifically is geared towards our social equity scholarship recipients, it was a panel of all Black cultivators that have really been trailblazing within the industry over the last few decades. And everything that you all just mentioned was, they went through these and checked all of those boxes of, they had a lot of family hiring. They talked about the benefits that all provided to them, and how all these social equity programs that are currently going on across the country, all of them had various different experiences with them, and we're talking about the pros and cons of those. So I really would highly recommend anyone that's an NCIA member here to check out that program following this, to really see these topics really in play. And I think that we've got some questions that have been coming into the Q&A board that actually line up really well with this conversation, or with this topic that we're touching on right now. So I'm going to pivot over to the Q&A board and then dovetail that in right into one of our next conversation starters. So Sandy asked, specifically as it relates to diverse hiring practices, how are companies like yours and other staffing companies broadening their search for diverse candidates? And where do you all primarily find those candidates to ensure diversity among those pools?
Yeah, well, I'm happy to go first. Look, the real talk is, since day one, we launched this 3+ years ago, every single one of our clients, all the way up to the big MSOs that really just don't get a lot of respect from the OGs in the industry, they have asked us from day one to bring them diverse slates. Since day one, regardless of the role, chief marketing officer, CEO, down through sales director, store manager, doesn't matter, the ask has always been, don't bring us a pale male slate. We want a diverse slate, and we want more women leaders. So of course, you go through your applicant pool and you focus on the most qualified candidates and give priority to those very highly qualified candidates with those types of profiles. And then in active search, we have a database. I'm sure Kimley has a database. We have recruiters and researchers that go on LinkedIn, and they understand we're looking for people with diverse backgrounds. We're not building a pale male slate. I mean, it's been understood for a while now. That's if you're a white guy out there, and I know people might not believe this, but it's understood you're at a disadvantage if it's you against a equally or slightly the same qualified candidate of a more diverse background. You're going to lose out. And sometimes it's for the optics of the hire. Sometimes it's, hopefully more often than not, you have a leadership team that's smart and understands the value in hiring for more diversity, which this industry is increasingly understanding. You have a lot of leaders coming in from more mainstream industries that have worked on diverse executive teams and diverse boards, and they understand that is valuable. Your company is better off with that. So the more talent that comes in from the mainstream, the better off the industry will be, because for the most part, they do understand that. So it's taking a while, and it's going to take a while, but we are working hard at that for sure.
Yeah, and I would add, absolutely, Bryan, I think I would add to that our conversation also, it can be challenging because sometimes we will be asked like, well, we need a woman in this spot. We need a person of color. We need, and the conversation that then we need to open up with the client is, well, let's talk about kind of what, as we're engaging candidates who are diverse, what are they going to see when they go to your website and start engaging with you? And because if it's, I think it goes deeper. Sometimes we get the sense that it's more of an optic thing. And it's like, well, truly, is this something ingrained in your culture that you believe in? Or is it more you want to make sure you have someone who shows up on the leadership team that represents this? So, I mean, there's good reasons to be doing it, period. But I think sometimes there's this belief that, we'll just be able to ask for a diverse candidate and they will appear. And there's a lot of partnership with the client with our, the companies we work with who, where they see that, okay, we need to really make this a part of the conversation in our culture so that when we do hire people who are diverse, that we understand that this is something we're trying to, get momentum on. And maybe we haven't done it perfectly before, but we know that we want to do it going forward. And here's why.
Yeah. And there are career fairs where they used to be physical, now they're virtual. There are career fairs and there are job sites which are specifically geared towards minority groups. And we've partnered with clients also to make sure that jobs get posted in there and to host virtual booths. And we participate in those as well. So it's, sometimes there's only so much you can do. If you look at where a lot of cannabis companies are, and not to make excuses, but if you look at, some locations around, Portland, Seattle, Denver, Boulder, where, the demographics are not in favor of delivering a very diverse slate, you can try, but at the end of the day, it's a business and you have to make a hire and you want to search for a diverse hire. But if you end up with 3 white guys, you're going to hire the best one because you have to make a hire. And if you're in one of those areas, where the demographics are not in your favor, and this is not industry yet that is, ponying up for relocation benefits, and now is really a weird time to be asking people to move around the country. It's, sometimes you end up just banging your head a little bit. So it's, I think the industry's done okay. We've got a long way to go, but I think that the right intentions are there in large part, at least from where we're sitting.
Yeah, exactly. And again, just sort of reiterating that we do have a diversity, equity, and inclusion geared program of webinars specifically that have touched on some of the topics that you all just covered, the pros and cons and failures of some social equity programs, and how better we can leverage NCIA's position to ensure a diverse industry as well. So I would definitely highly recommend anyone here that wants to dive deeper into that subject to review those recordings on our Industry Essentials webinar archive. And then also, like my colleague pointed out in the chat room, Tahir Johnson, the host of that program series, as well as our weekly Cannabis Diversity Report podcast, can also be reached at that email address. And you can learn more about all of NCIA's DEI efforts on that behalf as well.
Tahir's great. That's kudos to you guys for landing him and keeping him on the team. Tahir's a friend. He's great. He gets it. He really does. I love hearing that guy talk.
Oh, that's so great to hear. Yeah, we love to hear here. And I know right before we started the broadcast that I'm pretty sure that we just premiered another episode of the Cannabis Diversity Report on our Facebook live stream. So some of you that might have been on the live stream might have been joining us from there. So thank you for that. Perfect. All right. So let's continue the conversation. We're about halfway through our allotted hour. So I think that this probably can relate to where we're at right now in the conversation as well. So our next question that I've queued up here is, what selection tests are commonly being used by companies that you're working with? And if that does relate to, that having a diverse pool and expanding that out, touch on that as well, Kimley.
Yeah, I was thinking about this because I'm seeing some increase in the use of assessments. And so I've actually had some recent conversations where the companies are asking, well, what have you seen used out there outside of the cannabis industry for more of the well-established industries? And there's still kind of the standard personality ones, like the Hogan and the disc and what's the one that I'm not thinking of?
Myers,
Yeah,
Briggs.
thank you. Yeah.
That a few times here over the years at NCIA.
Yeah. And so I am seeing some, questions coming up about that, but not necessarily like a larger number of companies that are actually kind of begun using it as like part of their selection process. But for those who do want to use it, we always recommend, like, this is great to have as a piece of information. Never use it as a decision making tool on whether or not you're going to continue someone in an interview process. But the more interesting thing that I've seen emerge, and this has really piqued an interest of some of the companies in cannabis that we are connected to, where they say they're more intrigued by this emergence of culture assessments around culture. And some of the ones that I've noticed are like culture factors, culture index. I'm familiar with those, and I think those are really strong tools. And then there's actually, I wanted to give a shout out, I don't think she's on here, but there is a firm out of Chicago called Wave, WAIV. And what they're doing is a combination of like a proprietary tool that they've created, and then combined with like the Zoom interview with someone. So they combine the tool with kind of the person-to-person connection. And so I've actually recommended that to, a couple companies to kind of check it out, because it seems like that's really where we get hung up, is the culture fit. Not to say personality assessments don't have a value, but I'm totally, I'm kind of cheering on the culture tools.
Yeah, I've seen, sorry. I've seen, well, with a bigger focus on culture fit taking effect, I've seen a lot of those culture tests given more, not necessarily the big three that you rattled off. Those are pricey. Some lesser known ones that have caused fits for clients of ours using them. They don't seem to have good teams managing it on the back end. So I'm not ready to endorse any of them at all whatsoever, but personality tests to actually determine culture fit you're speaking to. And also some of our larger clients that do a lot of hiring, some of these companies out, some MSOs have hundreds of open job recs at any given time. We're aware of some gamified career success apps. So some of these apps where you're on your phone and they're timed and you're playing games. I'll give a shout out to one called KNACK, K-N-A-C-K, which is one that we've used before, which is it's incredibly a little bit scary, accurate in its assessment. K-N-A-C-K. So those gamified career success apps have done well for some of our partners.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I wasn't aware of those. So I'm definitely going to put that on my list of things to follow up on after this session. Well, we've got time, I think, for one more question in this segment. And I think this sort of provides a good inverse and flip side on the experience that we've been talking about. So we've been talking about, the hiring process as it relates to companies' experience in that. But what can you all talk on to the point of what are companies doing to optimize the employee experiences and engagement as that relates to HR policies, practices, and programs?
Yeah. Well, we spoke a little bit earlier about the hiring of more strategic HR leaders in the industry. There's a lot less of just lumping HR onto your CFO's desk or someone else's desk who doesn't really want it. So all things employee relations fall by the wayside. So I think that is a big deal, because with that you get great onboarding processes set up. You get a focus on benefits, health and retirement, because some companies have figured out how to bring 401ks in the fold, and you get a focus on succession planning, or just ways to move people around laterally in an organization to build new skills. So I think that, that is a huge one, along with, I think, really just the improvements in the industry at defining success and then measuring success for those hires, rather than I think for the most part the cannabis industry way has been, well, we all showed up today and had fun doing some things together, so we're successful because we're still in business. And there's been an evolution or transformation, whatever we want to call it, to more of a KPI culture. And if we're looking to bring top talent in, they want to understand how they're being measured and what KPIs am I trying to meet. It's a big deal, rather than just running blindly towards earning bonuses and additional equity awards without actually knowing how to earn that.
Yeah, and I would add on the kind of over the past year, it's interesting to see that we can have the KPIs and the efforts to engage employees, especially like in this environment where we're not able to be together as a team. And I think where I'm seeing the difference on companies that are kind of have navigated this more successfully was, I don't think we're not going back to like the normal, quote unquote normal. I think there will be a kind of a new normal on how we both assess talent and engage talent. And also once someone's on the team, then how do we ensure that they're, engaged as an employee? But I think the biggest thing is like coming from kind of the top, like the leadership level, in a very clear vision, and making the connection between what the new employee is doing and how their work impacts the success of the company overall, and how to be able to do that in a remote work environment as well. I think that's the challenge right now, and because you can have the metrics and all of that in place, but unless someone really like feels it and has the passion and ownership, it can be hard to kind of drive that.
Yeah, indeed. And I know we're going to run out of time. I want to add one more thing. I want to put a plug in for more chief of staff hires in the industry. I'm thinking about corporate communications. Companies have been improving the focus on corporate comms and how to get peers collaborating more so interdepartmentally, cross-departmentally, and forming corporate communication committees at some of these bigger companies to ensure that everyone's on the same page as to the how and we're going to get this done and why we're doing this. And I've seen quite a bit of chief of staff hires in this industry. I'd like to see more. I think those are your good connective tissue hires in a lot of cases that can be your smoke detector and just help your leaders that are running hard, because we all know how fast and furious things happen in this industry. So to have someone like that is really key. Just keeping a finger on the pulse of your organization and who's happy and who's not, and the why behind it and how to correct it.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great, and that's a unique way for cannabis also to kind of lead the way, and that way you don't see other companies doing that. So.
Exactly. Yeah, that canary in the coal mine role is definitely vital. And I can speak to silos being existing at an organization with a few dozen people. So I can only imagine the actual vitalness that collaboration and facilitating that corporate comms can come into an MSO as well. Perfect. All right. Well, I think we're right at that time to transition into the final segment of today's program. So I think we got one more live survey queued up that relates to previous recruitment experience. So get those responses in over the next few seconds while we're soliciting that survey response. Once we get a little bit over half or 75%, we'll reshare those results and then dive into the final segment of today's program. Again, if you have any questions for the panel, feel free to indicate your interest in joining the live broadcast by raising your hand in the audience pool, or following Sandy's direction there and posting Q&A questions to the Q&A board as well. All right, perfect. So we've got some responses coming in here. So people are rating their recruitment experience when landing their current or previous roles as either pretty much a even split between positive and room for improvement. So we've got an interesting split on this one. Perfect. So do you all want to dive into that at all before we dive into any of these questions and take away some insights and maybe dive a little bit deeper into that with any of the audience members?
2 words, pleasantly surprised. We got a 0 on that last one. That's great. That's a win. Fantastic.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much to all the audience members for participating in the live polls. Why don't we dive into a few more questions here? Okay, so next one that we've got queued up. This one is primarily geared towards Bryan, but Kimley, again, if you have any insights, feel free to jump in at any time. Bryan, what have you witnessed within the cannabis industry when it comes to this shift toward more professionalized practices around hiring and retaining talent?
Yeah. Well, most importantly is retention. I think as hiring practices professionalize, you're making better hires for key roles or any roles for that matter. And ultimately, what we need to do as an industry is we really need to understand that the churn of in this industry is high for everyone. It's like incredibly high. And we're not going to try to place blame on anyone, but if you're running a cannabis business, you probably understand the pain behind slowing down to speed up as it relates to anything. Just asking your team to put another process or procedure in place for XYZ thing. Same goes for hiring. Just sometimes slowing down to speed up, because the professionalizing of hiring should better ensure you get the right people in the right roles at the right time, and lead to better retention, along with assuming other things are in place like we just finished discussing as relates to employee relations. And better retention is going to help you scale your business more effectively. Your people are your best asset. In many cases, your only appreciating asset. So if you can retain your hold on to your people better, you're just going to get a better return, and you don't have to suffer from the regular brain drain and loss of all that intimate knowledge and people seeing their friends go and then they go. So it's the professionalizing of the hiring is going to help ultimately just professionalize the whole industry, because we'll all have more momentum behind scaling these companies.
Yeah, great points. And the next question actually is pretty well in line with a question that we just got on the Q&A board from Nicole McIntyre. So thank you for submitting that to the Q&A board. Nicole had a question related to what are companies doing now to maintain or improve company culture and integration of new employees now that we are now in a mostly remote workforce. I think that lines up well with where we were taking the conversation anyway. So Kimley, if you wanted to tackle that one.
Oh, sure. So I can't say I'm seeing something unique to cannabis, but overall, there has been, it's amazing how adaptable we are, because there has been, initially when we were all starting to do Zoom, I felt at least very disconnected. Like, this is not, and someone I was talking to recently, they put it really well, where they said, it feels less intimate because we're not able to see each other in person, but there's also more intimacy because you're seeing me in my home. Like, you're seeing, and you see my kids and my dogs and whatever. But I also think that, so I think companies are, what I'm seeing is that they're overall, we've adapted to this. So there's still, what I've heard about, and we've done personally also, is making sure that we don't allow this physical distance to keep us from connecting on a regular basis. So, and if anything, I would say that there's more where normally I would have been on the phone with someone, that I'm actually getting on a Zoom instead. So, and I'm hearing with companies too, that's what they're normally, maybe I would have just picked up the phone and called someone because they sit, I'm sitting in Chicago and they're in Atlanta. Instead, it's like, well, let's do a Zoom. And so I think there's engagement that comes from that. And I think even when we get on the other side of this, what I'm hearing people talking about is saying that let's keep this balance. And I'm sure you guys have probably heard this too. And the poll results show this as well. Like, there is a desire to continue to have the flexibility of kind of determining where you want to be. And I think employers are recognizing as well that oftentimes you can trust that people are going to get done what they need to get done. They can still continue to stay engaged with each other. And that they do want that kind of the balance of, well, if I can come into the office, great. If I need to be at home, great. And I might be able to be more efficient with it. But there's also, there can be time lost. So I think there is actually a gaining in efficiency by allowing people to have that flexibility, the time lost in commuting and all of that. So I think the more employers can be flexible with this and recognize that there is kind of a paradigm shift happening right now. And hopefully even we'll be on the other side where we're able to kind of choose between the two and get the fill of in-person and, online. And not all of us are extroverts. So some have enjoyed more of the, being able to have a balance, but I think that's the key, is the balance between the two.
Indeed. Yeah, I would add that there is one thing happening that I have to imagine is unique to the cannabis industry, and that is virtual smoke sessions. I doubt other industries are doing that with their people. I'm not sitting here endorsing it, but I think it's cool that companies are doing it and people are participating. So I think that's probably one thing that's unique. Look, you made a lot of good points, Kimley, and I, for one, am meeting a lot more spouses of clients and candidates than I would have ever before. I have to imagine, to your point, coworkers are doing the same. Here at our agency, we're all family, so we all hang out with each other, and we all know each other's spouses and kids and everything. But some of these bigger companies, I think you have more of that, which is probably a plus. And then in my experience, because a lot of companies are setting up rotating schedules, and even tech clients of ours in the space where people don't have to come to work, some of these cultures are great, and it's free lunches and it's Nerf gun battles, and it's a lot of things that a lot of these tech providers to cannabis that are specific to the cannabis industry. So they've set up rotating schedules where people can still come in and maintain some of that. And I think some office specific roles where people might, want to get out of their house and come to work in a rotating manner in a safe way is great. And my understanding is that people are doing that now with more care and empathy and affection towards one another when you're getting in those situations, because it's sort of a relief to be with your coworkers again. And I think pre-pandemic, a lot of people were upset with how they were being led in the industry. It wasn't that tough to get people interested in leaving their cannabis company for another, in large part because they were upset with leadership. They were being mistreated. There's a lot of first-time leaders in this industry that managed through anger and fear and threats, and everyone was very frazzled. And I think that's gone away, not completely, but somewhat. And it's a nicer vibe because, for people on the outside looking in, it's not, the cannabis industry vibe is not everyone just smoking out, holding hands, singing Kumbaya. It's, very far from that. But I think there's more Kumbaya vibes, just happy to see one another when coming in. So that's been nice.
Also, just really quickly too, I've heard about companies sending packages to their employees, whether it's like a little, oh, here's something, for dinner or treats, or, something for your dog, or just little things, or maybe it's a birthday celebration, something like that gets delivered to their door. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I can definitely speak to the virtual smoke sessions within our association personally as well. And I know many friends that are in the tech industry that have been getting, those meal kits and those wine tasting and bourbon tasting kits quite frequently as sort of those little workplace perks. So it's great to see these new inventive ways, because I completely agree with you, Kimley. We're definitely in a paradigm shift right now. Even on the other side of this pandemic, I think that every in-person event is going to have a virtual element to it, and this whole virtual workplace is going to be a thing of the future. So Really appreciate you all touching on those elements. So we got one more question lined up here. We've already touched on some of the efforts that companies are doing to foster diversity and leverage the value of diversity with equity and inclusion in their workplaces and workforce. So we're going to transition to a question sort of revolves around the last point related to organizational culture and the talent acquisition process. So Kimley, this is mainly geared towards you. Could you speak to what are some metrics that might be unique to the cannabis industry or just at large that companies are using to assess their organizational culture and talent acquisition practices at the moment?
Yeah, pulse surveys are something that I think are being used quite a bit, where it's kind of checking in with employees where they can share varying things. Do you feel valued in the work that you're doing today? Is it clear what's expected of you? Do you feel like you can, there's someone who within the organization who advocates for your career development? And do you feel connected to your peers? And if so, why? And so I think, and those are so easy to do. Like I know some of our clients have done them through SurveyMonkey, and they do it on a regular basis and look for kind of the, percentages that are popping up. But the key to all of that is that there is a follow-up from, leadership to say, these are the things, like being transparent about what comes from these pulse surveys and engagement surveys, and to say, like, this is what we've heard, and these are the actions we're going to take to kind of, keep continuing doing the good things that you all are experiencing, or address the things that are more challenging. Beyond something simple like that, there are bigger things that they can do that are much more costly, but especially within cannabis, I'm hearing more of these kind of affordable surveys that they can implement on a regular basis, and then follow up with action to show that they heard the employees.
Perfect.
You have to follow up. Yeah, people are gonna
add on that, Bryan.
Yeah, I mean, if assuming those surveys are being conducted confidentially,
right?
Right. If people are taking their time and really pouring their heart into it, just revealing and sharing what's on their minds. If you're just going to dismiss it, if you're just doing it to say you did it, boy, that's doing way more harm than good. You're better off not even doing them at all. So yeah, good point. Just, you have to follow up.
Yeah, perfect. Well, we're getting close to the end of the allotted hour for our program. So want to reiterate a thank you to all the audience members that have been participating in the Q&A. If you do have any additional questions that you want to pose to the panel, I think that we probably have time to address one more. So I'm going to lead the panel in final thoughts while we're waiting on any additional question that might come in from the audience over the next few moments. Don't see anything yet. So yeah, perfect. Okay, great. So we want to be respectful of all the audience and panelists' time right now. So why don't we go just Kimley and Bryan, just lead us in a sort of final thought from today's segment and a key takeaway that you want all the audience members to take from today's program.
Final thoughts. So I think we all have been through a lot over the past year. And I do think, like I referenced before, I think there's a paradigm shift that's happening. I think there's a lot of opportunity for the cannabis industry to kind of, blaze the trail on this. And, I feel very optimistic and encouraged by the uptick in hiring that we have seen, just especially in Q4 and the beginning of this year. So yeah, I continue to be really energized and, excited to be here. And I really appreciate you guys giving Bryan and I the opportunity to do this.
Yeah, indeed.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure. Bryan, you have a final thought for the audience to take away from today's program?
Yeah, I do. It's not completely tied into what we've discussed, but I think it aligns. What our cultural pillars here, I guess you could say, with Hutter Esquire is transparency, trust. I like anytime I'm given a soapbox to stand on, I like to scream at people and companies to be transparent and trust in each other, that we're being transparent in how we're presenting what we're offering. So to the companies, be transparent about the culture that you offer. Don't, sell something you think the candidate wants, because of course they're getting in there day one to find out it's something else. Same to candidates. You want to get in the industry. Don't sell yourself into a job that you shouldn't be in. It doesn't do anyone any good. You're going to be out looking for work again soon. There's nowhere to hide in this industry. So I think just a lot of trust and transparency, just copious amounts of that, is going to do our industry really well. Just everything's are moving fast, and it's easier to operate that way if we're just upfront about everything. We all sleep better at night, and we'll be a lot less stressed. That's my ask.
Fantastic. Well, I think that we couldn't end on anything better than 3 pillars as a takeaway on one of our webinars. So I really appreciate those final thoughts, Bryan and Kimley. We're going to transition into the outro of today's program. So I'd love to have all the audience members give a big virtual round of applause to our panel. If you enjoyed today's session, raise your hand in the audience pool. Perfect. Awesome. And let them know what your biggest takeaway from today's session was inside the chat room over the next few moments. Our panelists are going to be leaving the virtual stage, but they'll be sticking around and engaging with audience members. Think of this as the front of the room chat that you get with the panel after the panel concludes if we were at one of our in-person conferences. So stick around in the chat room for the next few moments. Our panelists are going to leave the virtual stage. They'd love to answer any follow-up questions that you might have in the chat room. So from there, let's transition into the outro here. So right now, perfect. Thank you, Bryan. Thank you, Kimley. Thank you all for joining us today. I really appreciate it so much. All right. And as always, we're going to leave you all with a quick preview of some upcoming activities underneath the NCIA Industry Essentials program umbrella that we'd all love your participation in. Before doing that, definitely do highly recommend that you take note of the contact information here for both Bryan and Kimley. We'll also be supplying this via email post-event. If you have any additional questions, comments, or concerns for Bryan or Kimley, please don't hesitate to reach out with them and engage with them personally following today's program. They'd love to assist you in any hiring processes that you're engaging in and chat with you more about these awesome culture shifts that they all highlighted during today's program as well. And then additionally, also please make sure to take note of the social handles for each of their companies, Hunter and Esquire and Drive Talent, and make sure to stay up to date on all of their activities and programs that they're engaging in as well. All right, and so let's get into the preview of some upcoming sessions. So first off, next week, we have the first in a multi-part series of NCIA Committee Insights program. This session is being hosted on Tuesday afternoon at 1 p.m. Eastern Time and is entitled Future-Proofing Your Business, Vaping Product Regulation Preparedness. We all know vaping regulations are coming, so join members of NCIA's Cannabis Manufacturing Committee to learn what to expect and what manufacturers can do to support compliance, as well as to help protect the environment and, most importantly, public health. As with all of our Industry Essentials educational webinar, this session is free for all current NCIA member businesses and only $15 for non-members interested in participating. Members, log into your account to secure your free pass. Non-members, activate your membership to gain access to this and other amazing benefits, or you can purchase the pass to continue engaging with this invaluable programming prior to taking the plunge on an annual commitment for membership. All right. And then additionally, please do note that outside of next week's Industry Essentials session, we do have, I believe, 8 upcoming webinars taking place over the next 6 weeks. That's over $100 value in free complimentary passes to engage with this vital educational content. So it pays for itself to just join NCIA today. So if you are one of the few non-members that's participating in today's session, please do head to NCIA's website, www.thecannabisindustry.org/join following today's session to secure all of the free passes for these upcoming events that you'll find listed on our website. All right. And with that, thank you all so much for participating in another NCIA Industry Essentials educational webinar. A huge thank you again to our panelists, Bryan, Passman, and Kimley Svendsen, our audience members, and all of the NCIA member businesses which make our work possible each and every day. Please complete the attendee survey after leaving the meeting room to provide some invaluable feedback to our panelists to improve future sessions. And do note that all NCIA members receive exclusive 30-day access to a formatted video recording of all of our webinars that are first posted in our members-only community, NCIA Connect. So if you're interested in re-engaging with today's content, or you have a colleague or coworker that's interested in watching today's program, please make sure to stay on the lookout to your inbox. You'll be directed to that NCIA Connect library posting where the recording will be live for the next 30 days for NCIA members only. Then it will be released to the public beyond that. Okay, I hope you all have a wonderful week. I look forward to seeing you all again next time for another NCIA Industry Essentials educational webinar, which, as I mentioned, is next Tuesday afternoon. We'll leave you all with this end of event credit sequence highlighting the 25 plus member businesses that participated in this afternoon's session. As always, while doing so, we'll showcase some audio stylings by the resident musician at our Colorado-based music events, KJ Liss, and his Illinois-based musical project, Indigo Sun. Enjoy. Hope you all have a great week and weekend. Stay warm, and we'll see you next week. Thank you all so much.